All right, let's dive into one of the shortest letters ever written. But don't let its size fool you. This thing is packed with a universe of human drama. We're talking a desperate plea, a broken relationship, and an absolutely radical idea of forgiveness. We're going to walk through it verse by verse and really paint a picture here, a kind of cinematic journey that's going to make this story stick with you. You know, the whole letter, every single word, hangs on this one question. This isn't just some casual note. It is a masterclass in persuasion. A guy named Paul is about to ask his friend, Philemon, to do something that, well, it pretty much defies every cultural, legal, and personal rule of their time. Seriously, the stakes could not be any higher.
All right, let's jump right in with verses 1 and 2. So picture this scene with me. We're in a cold, kind of dim prison cell. But the guy inside, Paul, he's not defeated at all. He is absolutely laser-focused, dictating this letter. And hey, check out who it's addressed to. It's not just to his buddy Philemon. Nope, he includes Apphia, Archippus, and the entire church that meets in their house. This is a huge deal. This isn't some private message. It's a public appeal. Basically, everyone is about to hear what he's going to ask.
Okay, on to verse 3. Now, this might look like just a polite hello, but it's so much more. Think of it like this. Imagine a wave of calm, of genuine goodwill, being sent from that dark prison. It's traveling all those miles and just washing over Philemon's whole house. Paul is being so smart here. He's setting a tone of peace before he drops the bombshell.
And in verse 4, Paul makes it really personal. Just picture him for a second, eyes closed, deep in prayer. You can almost see it on his face, right? This isn't just some routine mention. It's a look of real, genuine gratitude and affection for Philemon. He's bringing up their deep, shared history. This is a conversation between friends, between brothers, not some stuffy, formal request.
So, let's check out verse 5. Paul's basically saying, hey, Philemon, I've been hearing things about you. Good things. Let's get a mental image of Philemon himself. He's this well-respected guy, always out there helping people in his community. He's got this reputation for being generous, for having this incredibly deep faith. What Paul's doing here is like holding up a mirror. He's reminding Philemon of the good man he already is.
Okay, now verse 6. This is a brilliant piece of strategy. Paul is totally building Philemon up. It's kind of like a coach hyping up a star player right before the championship game, you know? Remember who you are. Remember what you're capable of. He's getting Philemon's heart and mind ready for the really heavy request that's just around the corner.
Verse 7 paints such a cool picture. It says Philemon has refreshed the hearts of the saints. So to really lock that in, imagine a super tired traveler on a hot, dusty road. And Philemon is the guy who steps out of his house and hands him a cup of cool, life-giving water. That's the kind of guy he is. That's his reputation. He literally brings relief and joy to people.
And then we get to verse 8, and boom, the tone shifts. Big time. You can almost see Paul holding up his hand and saying, look, buddy, I have the authority as an apostle to command you to do this. He's putting his cards on the table. He's acknowledging his rank. He absolutely could make this a direct order.
But then, in verse 9, he pivots. He deliberately chooses a different path. Instead of a command, he makes an appeal. And to really feel this, picture a close-up on Paul's face. See the lines from his age, the exhaustion from being in prison. He's not pulling rank here. He's appealing as a friend. And in doing so, he's making himself completely vulnerable. And then, verse 10. This is where the bombshell drops. The whole reason for this letter is finally revealed. It's a man named Onesimus. And we find out Onesimus is Philemon's runaway slave. But listen to how Paul talks about him. He doesn't call him the slave. He calls him my son, someone he's personally mentored and grown to love right there in that prison.
Now, verse 11 is just brilliant. It's a clever play on words. See, the name Onesimus literally means profitable or useful. So Paul says, this guy who was once useless to you, well, now he's incredibly useful to both of us. The image to have here is of a broken, rusted tool being thrown into a forge and coming out completely remade, stronger and more valuable than ever. That's the transformation we're talking about.
Verse 12 just cranks the emotional dial all the way up. Receive him, he says. That is my own heart. Wow. Just picture Paul actually placing a hand over his own chest, right over his heart, and then gesturing toward Onesimus. He's saying, to welcome this man is to welcome me. To reject him, well, you might as well be tearing out my own heart.
Next, in verse 13, Paul straight up admits just how valuable Onesimus has become to him personally. Let's get a quick, powerful image in our minds. Onesimus tending to Paul in that prison cell. Maybe he's bringing him food or helping him write these very letters. He's basically become Paul's right-hand man, a total lifeline in a really dark place. This leads perfectly into the core principle in verse 14. Imagine two paths are laid out in front of Philemon. One path is labeled forced choice. The other is labeled free gift. And Paul is standing back, just pointing Philemon toward that second path. He's making it crystal clear. True generosity, real forgiveness, it can't be forced. It has to be a voluntary gift. All right, let's move to verse 15. Watch how Paul completely reframes the whole story here. Picture a door slamming shut. That's Onesimus running away. A moment of betrayal and loss. But then, that same door slowly swings back open. And this time, it reveals a joyful, permanent reunion. Paul is basically suggesting, hey, maybe this painful separation happened for a reason, for a much bigger purpose. And that brings us to verse 16, which is, this is the absolute heart of the entire letter. This is the great transformation. Onesimus left Philemon's house as a piece of property, as a slave. Paul is sending him back as a beloved brother. His status, his identity, his whole being has been completely and radically redefined. This is the new reality Philemon has to face. Okay, so in verse 17, Paul puts his own reputation square on the line. He says, "Receive him as you would receive me." The visual here is two hands clasping in a firm handshake, a symbol of their partnership. Paul is leveraging their entire friendship. He's saying, look, if our bond means anything to you, you will welcome this man as if it were me walking through your front door. Verse 18 is all about removing any financial excuse Philemon might have. A runaway slave, that was a huge financial loss back then. So Paul basically takes out a blank check. Picture an ancient receipt, and you see Paul himself writing on it. Any debt Onesimus owes, put it on my account. Just like that, he takes on all the debt himself. And in verse 19, he makes it a legally binding promise. Get this image, a close-up of Paul's hand, gripping a stylus, scratching these words onto the parchment. This is his personal signature, his guarantee. Then he adds this little, it's a gentle but pretty powerful reminder, not to mention, Philemon, that you kind of owe me your own self. Then in verse 20, Paul calls back to that word he used earlier, refresh. He's asking Philemon to do for him what Philemon is famous for doing for everyone else. So let's visualize a heart icon that's kind of dim and tired. Now imagine Philemon says yes, and that heart just lights up, becoming bright and full. That's how much Paul is personally invested in this decision. Verses 21 and 22. This is basically Paul's closing argument. First, he expresses total confidence in Philemon, but then he adds a little twist. Picture Paul looking out his prison window with this knowing smile on his face. He says, "Oh, and by the way, get a guest room ready for me. I'm going to be visiting soon." It's such a masterful touch of friendly pressure, right? He's coming to check up on the outcome in person. Now in verses 23 and 24, Paul just starts listing name after name. These are not just random shout-outs. Epaphras, Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, Luke. He says they all send their greetings. And the visual here is all of their faces watching, waiting to see what Philemon will do. Paul is making it incredibly clear, hey, this is not just a private family issue anymore. The whole community is watching. And finally, we land at verse 25. The letter ends exactly where it began, with grace. After all that tension, all the brilliant arguments, and the super high emotional stakes, the very last word is a blessing. Let's just picture a warm, peaceful light filling up the screen. It's like a final prayer that Philemon will make his choice with grace in his own heart. And that's it. The scroll just ends. We're left hanging with this massive cliffhanger. Paul has built this absolutely airtight case for radical forgiveness, right? He appealed to their friendship, their faith, their shared love. He's dismantled every single possible objection Philemon could have. But we never actually find out what happened. And so, in a way, the decision gets passed on to us. What choice would you make? What do you think really happened when Onesimus showed up at Philemon's door?